So, hello, friends. Once again, we are in another episode of Manage Better, and I will try and bring you a fantastic speaker who can dispel some myths around a key topic that many of us actually struggle with, which is digital transformation. So digital transformation is many things to many people, and all of us realize that it could mean something to one person, it could mean an app to one person, it could mean a website to another person, it could mean the whole enterprise transformation to another person. And what do you do when you are confused, when you don't know a subject? You go to an expert. So today is that day where I'm bringing an expert on this topic so that we can learn from his experience and knowledge. Right. So I'll get to the guest in a bit, but for those of you who are new to this show and have not attended the previous ones, my name is Anshuman Tiwari, and I'm your host for the show Manage Better. This show is live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter today. It's always live on LinkedIn and YouTube, definitely. And all archives are available on my website, managebetter.in. Please remember .in, not .com. And of course, on my YouTube channel by my name, right? So do subscribe so that you can get your alerts on the next episode. And also, if you wanted, you can check the previous episode. So I do post, usually the interviews are about an hour, but I do post 5-minute snippets as well. So if you are short on time, you could get that. And of course, there is a podcast version which goes on Spotify and other leading podcast channels. So the show is back after a break of about a month or so with a new series focused on transformation. I hope I can put together a series as successful as the previous one, which was more around skills and knowledge areas like communication, executive presence, quality management, customer satisfaction, and the likes. This one is a little bit more on transformation focused. As you know, the show is about managing better, about getting better. I believe truly that none of us have control on where we are coming from, where we start, but all of us have a control on where we are going. What is the journey we are taking? What can we do today? What can we do next day? And so on. So my show is about bringing skills to you, which will help you get better at work and hopefully in life as well, about new skills which can help you get better every day, every week, every year. Right. So without further ado, I'll bring in Nitin Seth, and I'll also introduce him in a minute. So hi, Nitin, and allow me a couple of minutes to introduce you, and then we go live with the show.
Yeah.
So
Hello, and look forward to our conversation, Anshuman.
thanks, Nitin. So Nitin is a well-known name, and I'm sure it doesn't need much introduction, but let me try. Right. So Nitin is a global manager and entrepreneur and industry leader and a management consultant. He's passionate about building and transforming businesses, driving innovation, coaching, and building high-performance teams. Track record of transformational impact across businesses for not-for-profit situations as well, and a unique ability to drive strategy to execution. I think this is something we will focus on as well during the conversation, that strategy has no real purpose if it cannot be executed. And Nitin is a true example of how to do it. And of course, leading with passion and integrity. Among his specialities are building and scaling up service businesses, large scale transformation, innovation, offshoring, and public speaking, which you will enjoy today. He's currently CEO of Incedo Inc. Since 2017 or so, and has earlier held senior positions at Flipkart, Fidelity, and McKinsey. Nitin is a graduate of IIT Delhi and MBA from IIM Lucknow. Welcome once again, Nitin, to the show. And any opening comments from you before we get into the questions, Nitin?
No, very nice to be talking to you. I think we last met in February of last year, which was, I think, my last travel before COVID. So very good to be connecting with you, and also just moment to acknowledge, recognize the extraordinary situations we are going through, especially in India. That COVID for the world has been such an extraordinary event over the last almost a year and a half. But India has been it has been a very very difficult situation in the last 2 months. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that, and but life has to go on, and I'm very happy to be here on the show with you.
Thanks, Nitin. Um, so, to my audience, I think one of the reasons why Nitin is here, of course, apart from his stellar accomplishments, is this book. So, this is a bestseller already, and those who want to make a note of the book, "Winning in the Digital Age," we will be talking a little bit more about this book as well. So, you know, getting into the show, Nitin, the I actually spoke to a few people and said that, look, I'm speaking to Nitin. Maybe my own questions might not be enough. So why don't you share some questions, or what if you were speaking to him, what you would ask? And of course, many knew you from your Fidelity and Flipkart days in India. So one of the questions, and this is more from the book actually, and surprisingly, one gets defined by one's last innings. So the book, the book featured very prominently. And the first question around is that digital is many things for many people. Like I in the introduction shared that it's many things. For somebody it is an app, somebody it is an enterprise solution, for somebody else it could be just a website. How do you define the digital age that we live in? What are the key features in your mind? How do you define digital age today?
See, I see digital in very broad and in very pervasive terms, Anshuman. So for me, digital is the age we are living in. It is to me synonymous as saying 21st century. Yeah, so I see it in that broad context. If I talk a little more formally, it's also often known as the fourth industrial revolution. This is when we have gone through successive waves of industrial revolution, from the first, which was about mechanical production, to to assembly line, electric power, information age, and then this digital age. And digital age really builds on all the um, previous eras of industrial revolution, the previous three eras of industrial revolution. And I think what is unique about the industrial age, and Anshuman, is that it is the convergence of a lot of technology forces. It is the convergence of a lot of technology forces. So it is the rise of devices. The number of devices in the world has exploded. Over the last 10 years, it has gone from 5 billion to 25 billion devices, which will double over the next couple of years. It is the explosion of data, the volume, velocity, variety of data, of storage capacity, of computing power. So all of these trends are converging. They are all coming together, and what it means is it is changing our lives dramatically. How we consume information. Yeah, that many people have moved away from the morning newspaper to morning Twitter feed. Yeah, it's just inconceivable for me that growing up, it was the first thing you did. You read the newspaper. Just the beginning of your day now. You're checking your WhatsApp messages or you're checking Twitter. It's just a very different good morning. To starting from that to how you buy, how you, where your grocery comes from, and at a very individual level to to organizations, what business means, and businesses now, all so much of it is not through physical contact. It is virtual, it is remote. COVID has only accelerated that. Yeah. So all of this is digital. It is how we live, how we consume, how companies deliver their products and services. It is, of course, what you see, which is often called the customer experience, but it is also internally how companies manage and deliver their operations.
No, I think fairly well summarized, Nitin. I often also say that apart from the misery that the COVID has brought in, it is both a disruptor and accelerator. So in many industries, it is an accelerator also, and of course, it is a disruptor for other industries because and while the nature of the pandemic is a completely different thing, but the nature of disruption is something that we will see every few years. It is like the semiconductors, the Moore's law. which changed the semiconductor business. And today, like you said, the computing power in a phone is maybe much more than a computer even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So those things are, of course, accelerating all this. And like, I just thought of something that I was reading recently, that it is not that AI is new. For example, AI has been around since Alan Turing's days, but it can now fit in your palm. So
Yes.
the delivery is medium has changed. So it is now fitting in your palm. It was earlier fitting in a room. So therefore it was not useful. But yeah, moving on. So the second area, which of course is more from your book and of course from your experiences, uh, you talk about the new rules of business, right? So and there are a few. Give us some key new rules in your mind. Maybe top two, three that you think have radically changed how we do business or we will do business. The new rules that you talk about in your book as well.
Sure. Let me first touch on, Anshuman, why the new rules. The why of any situation is very critical. Once you get the why, then the what and the how follow more naturally. So, see, you look at digital, and that's the age we are in. Digital transformation is therefore very naturally such a huge opportunity. There is billions, rather hundreds of billions of dollars being put on digital transformation. Yeah. Last, estimates I had were that $2 trillion or more had been put across the world on digital transformation. That's a massive number. But the very, very interesting thing is that 70% of digital transformation initiatives fail or don't achieve their full potential. Yeah. That's a shocker, isn't it? And there are estimates which are more than 70%.
Yeah, yeah,
Yesterday, I
absolutely.
was having a conversation, where it was coming out to be 80%. So it's a humongous number, and that has always been something I've been very, very, very intrigued by. That the companies are not suddenly bad. It's not that suddenly the management has like gone completely berserk. Why is it so difficult? Yeah. And and over the last 10 years of really trying to understand this topic, I've come to the conclusion that, look, the digital age is fundamentally different in so many dimensions. It's a lot more. The speed is different. It is a lot more volatile. It's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more iterative. There are so many characteristics which are very, very different, and therefore it requires new rules. It requires new rules. If it's like playing cricket, that if all your life you played a 5 day test match, version, and then suddenly you're pitchfork into IPL final, into a T20 match. What will you do? It doesn't mean that you're not a good player, but just that's a different game. And that is what digital age is about. It is the move from the 5 day to 1 day to T20. Now, what are some of the new rules of management? The first rule is I would call it innovate and shape the future. Now, in business, when we set our goals, when we set our targets, how do we normally do it? We do it based on, in history, over the past, what has happened. Now, this digital age is changing so rapidly that if you try to do that, you will be late. Okay, you will be a follower, and if you're a follower, you can never win. Yeah. So that entire mindset of history into X% is my future is completely wrong. The only way you can win is if you are the one who's shaping the future. And the future is not a given, it is something you are creating constantly and creating. And there are great opportunities of doing that in the digital age. So that's the first thing. You have to win, you have to shape the future yourself. How will you shape it? You will shape it through innovation. Yeah, that is the only way you can shape the future. When you do that, you will end up also cannibalizing your business. Yeah, and then that is typically a great fear that organizations have, but you have to go beyond that. So that's the first rule of new rule of business. Now, each of these rules are quite deep, so maybe I'll just pick up another or two, and then pause.
Yeah.
The second one I will talk about is how you think about strategy. Strategy has typically been the starting point of most business. Yeah, that you look at the market, you say, okay, this is my broad strategy as a company. I break down that strategy into more business unit or functional strategy, then I set more specific execution priorities and then execute. There has been this sequential or linear relationship from strategy to execution. Yeah. But in this digital world, the best laid plans do not survive contact with reality, because reality is very, very fast changing. Yeah. It's like Muhammad Ali famously said that everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. In the digital age, you're getting punched in the face all the time. And very well laid out strategy can be a limitation, can be a constraint. Yeah, the reality in this digital age is execution. Yeah, is execution. There is a lot more of a focus on execution. So you have an agile strategy, then very quickly you get to execution, and then you connect the dots. What works, you do more of. What doesn't work, you don't do. Yeah, and you connect back, and then you have a strategy. So it's a very, very iterative, recursive relationship between strategy and execution. Let me pause here. We can spend a lot of time the entire show just on all the 8 new rules of management in this digital age. But let me pause here. I'm sure.
Yeah, so I will of course recommend everybody who wants to get a little deeper into this to check this book, and it is of course a lot more than these 2 8 rules, a lot more. It's quite unput downable kind of a thing. So moving on, I think Nitin, the next kind of question I had more was around the the difference between this digitization and the confusion between digitization and digital transformation. So I've been speaking to various people, and it is quite intriguing that uh, there is still this talk between digitization versus digital transformation. So do you have a view here, or if you have one, can you bring out the difference and share some examples of this digital transformation from your experience in the recent past?
See, there is no reason for confusion, Anshuman, and there is not. It's not so much a question of difference. I see digitization as an essential component and a subset of digital transformation. Yeah. So digitalization is this process in different ways of converting or making transactions digital. Yeah. So from physical to bits and bytes. Yeah. Often when the word was initially used, and it has been around for like decades actually.
Yeah.
It's not a new word at all. When I started my career in '96 in McKinsey and we were doing consulting work, I still remember that I was leading this very big program for Unit Trust of India, which was at that point like a massive entity. And the big program we were doing was digitalization of physical records, yeah, of converting physical records into more electronic records, and you know that was it was a digitalization program that's still valid today. That's still true today. But the whole concept of digital transformation has gone well beyond digitizing information or records or processes, which is the context it was used. Digital, as we discussed in with your opening question, is how we lead our lives, how business is done, and there are so many aspects to it. Yeah, so digitalization is one aspect to it. Digital transformation, therefore, is the process of how an existing business, which has largely been a physical brick and mortar business, become more digital. There are typically three aspects of it, three big aspects of it. The first is from a business model, or how you engage with your customers. Yeah, that you are now the digital channel, whether it's your website or app, or chatbots, which does not require a human interaction, is becoming bigger and bigger. So, for example, with all the banks that I work with, the telecom companies that I work with, digital transformation for them means increasing the percentage of transactions, of customer transactions, which are on the web, which are on the app. Yeah. And all of them, for them, digital transformation, the main metric is penetration, digital penetration. X percentage of my transaction are happening digitally. That's one aspect of it. Yeah. The second aspect of it is internal, which is automation of processes, and automation also is some part of it, which is how many of my transactions are now straight through, are not touching a human. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's take an example of Amazon or Flipkart. If you order in a day, you're getting whatever the product you order for at your home. It is not just the website. It's not just the app. There is so many things which are happening. The entire supply chain is working, and that supply chain is very highly automated. Is very highly automated, and that is the second part of digital, which is automation of how the operating model works. And the third part is the product itself. Yeah, that what you're consuming is now digital. So we started with taking the example of news.
Yeah.
That news has moved from physical newspaper or even books to that is the physical copy that you're holding versus Kindle. Yeah, Kindle is a product in that sense. Yeah, or so in a way the product itself has now become digital. So these are all different aspects of it. But when you look at the word transformation, it is of course this, but lot more. This is to now deliver all of this. It's not just a technology shift; it's an organization shift. Your entire organization needs to change. So to me, digitization and digital transformation is less of an issue. Digitization is a necessary aspect of digital transformation. The bigger question, Anshuman, really is that I think business transformation is equal to digital transformation, and digital transformation is equal to business transformation. I think that is what I would like the audience here to anchor around. That digital has become synonymous with business transformation that I'm seeing in most of my clients.
Yeah, and I mean, in some conversations I've tried to summarize is that at some point digital transformation and business transformation were two sides of the same coin. Today it is the same side. So it is really the same thing. There is no large scale transformation which is possible without um, some level of digital transformation, and that is where most companies are actually now trying to get the advantage. And you did mention that large programs do fail, and so of course you've separately spoken about why they fail. We won't get there, but it's a good point. We are two-thirds into the show, so my quick reminder to the audience that if you have questions, please chime in. Let your questions come in. The more the merrier. Nitin has been generous with his time, so we will take the questions live. And yeah, and then of course, moving on to my next question. So in your book also, and when we have spoken earlier as well, and I've always found you that you've always been very global in your outlook. So it's not that there is this Indian concept which goes global. There is that global concept. There is a global advantage, and you've talked about it in the book as well, that there are these global advantages that companies have. What is this advantage, and how can companies benefit from it in the digital age? Suddenly, there is a global advantage which wasn't there earlier. What is this advantage?
See, digital by its very nature is, you can't put it in a box, Anshuman. It is not. It's not local. The moment you set up a digital front end, any website, managebetter.in. Yeah, well, the .in is there, but it's accessible to all 7 billion people on Earth, right? Or
Yeah.
all who have internet connection can access managebetter.in. The moment you put it on this show out there on LinkedIn and YouTube, it's global, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a global show. So everything in digital is global, and just recognizing that, and what a great opportunity it is. Now, there are two ways of thinking about it. It is on the demand side, yeah, that my opportunity today with any business is to be a global business. I think it's a particularly important message for many of our entrepreneurs in India. Yeah, that see an entrepreneur sitting in the Bay Area, or I would say even in China, is thinking global, but somehow our entrepreneurs, we tend to be more limited. We tend to have this assumption that, you know, we are not close to the end customer, and maybe we can't be global. That's absolutely incorrect. The guy sitting in the Bay Area is also not the biggest market for YouTube and WhatsApp. Is India. Yeah, but
Yeah.
but it's somebody sitting in Bay Area who's centralizing it, not fully, because a lot of their development is here in India. So that's one side of it, that the demand, the customer is global. Second is that, look, when you think about delivery in this digital age, okay, any business has these dual challenges. Any business. So first is around innovation. That's the first new rule of business we talked about. The second is for efficiency. You have to cut costs. Yeah. Why do you have to cut costs? Because of such intense customer kind of activity, that the customer is so demanding. And in the digital age, you have so much product proliferation, and you also have pricing transparency. All of this means that any market you're looking at, prices continue to crash. Yeah. And you have to maintain the profit. So what do? You have to reduce costs. Yeah. So any company in the world, even if it is Apple, even if it's Amazon, even if it's Tesla, they have to do this. They have to innovate, they have to reduce costs. A lot of that is in the technology space. The only way you can do that is by having a global supply chain. There is no other way you can do that. So it is not that global advantage of having is a very necessary basis to play in this digital age. And it is maybe 5-10 years back, it was with this efficiency mindset that, we will set up our technology delivery in India, and it will help us reduce costs. But just that's one small part of it. The velocity at which you need to move, the innovation you need to drive, the new product that you need to get to the market, you just cannot do that without that global supply chain.
Yeah. I think as you were speaking, I was thinking that in many ways I am the product of that efficiency, era, and I've noticed in my own work and several of my peers or colleagues in the industry that uh, I have a quality and process transformation background, and most of the work we do these days is nothing like it was 5 years or 10 years ago. Totally nothing like. If I work more on digitizing the whole performance monitoring concepts, and this is internal to a company. So external is, of course, make selling more at less and all that kind of stuff. But even internally within companies, digital transformation is a big thing. And if we are not focusing on that, we're just paying too heavy a price, as organizations and as supply chains. And frankly, many companies don't make it past the last few years, more because they could not change internally and externally as well. So yeah, so quite a few questions coming in, Nitin, but we will, or maybe it's a good time to take some questions, because I don't want to usually miss the questions. So I will also I'll select some and bring them on the screen as well, so that you can read while I read out as well. Jagruti, thank you for your question. Does digitization for government organizations mean privatization? Slightly contentious. You can choose to skip this, Nitin.
No, of course, no, not at all, Jagrati, not at all, not at all. Now, modernization for government organizations, could involve privatization, but government, but uh, digitization and privatization are two independent threats to my mind. Now, I would say digitization for government organizations is a super necessary and critical activity. Yeah, that so much of our national GDP is locked in the government sector, and I think there is a huge opportunity of unlocking that. Um, End of the day, government services are for citizens and to ensure better citizen delivery. That's one part of it. The second part of digital that we discussed and Anshuman also talked about is internal, how the services are delivered, which is about automation, yeah, which is about various kind of how you use technology. Both of those dimensions, um, I think there's a humongous opportunity for digitization in the government organization, and I think India has actually made a pretty good start. That if you look at procurement in a number of areas, where e-marketplaces are being used. You look at land records. There is increasing conversation about cutting edge technology like blockchain being used. So it's actually fascinating that when I look at the government sector, there are huge opportunities for digital transformation. I think it's also an opportunity for India to leapfrog. And why is that? Because generally the leverage of technology in various government services in India is behind the curve. Now, behind the curve in digital age is not necessarily a big problem, simply because technology is changing so fast. Yeah, and it's because you don't have much. You have an opportunity of leapfrogging to the latest technology. So I actually think it's a great opportunity.
No, thanks, Nitin, for the answer. I will skip a few and pick Jagdish Ramaswamy's question. Jagdish is a senior professional in the Birla Group. We've worked together in the past, but his question is more around what is your view on how IT architecture has to change, modernize to meet the expectation of the digital age? Slightly specific, but if you want a couple of minutes on this.
Yeah, sure. So Jagdish, there are these multiple. When you think about the digital age or digital transformation and think about the IT stack, there are these different elements. Yeah. So there is customer experience, there is analytics layer, there is the data layer, there is cloud, there is AI. There are these multiple elements, which are there. Now, I'll make 2 or 3 key comments here, but this is a big topic. How do you think about the ID architecture? The first one I would like to make is that the modern ID stack, you have to think of it not in specific elements, not as just AI or blockchain and so on and so forth, but think of it like an orchestra. Think of it like an orchestra that each element has to be high quality, but the key thing is how they all come together. You can have great artists, but if they are not synchronized, then you will have very jarring sound. And I think that's a very good. I find it to be a good frame or analogy to think about the stack. The second point I would make is that in this, the orchestra conductor is data. Yeah, that is the conductor. That is whether the IT stack is in the from a digital perspective is effective or not. Whether it's a virtuous cycle that you're engaging customers, you're generating a lot of data. That data again you use to personalize your services, offerings, experience for the customer. It is way more effective for them. They use it more and they generate more data. This virtuous cycle is all dependent. The most critical player in that is data. Yeah, of how you are managing the data in your stack. That's the second point I would make. The third point I would make is that as you think about your IT stack and think about change in that, the most natural way of driving that is via the cloud. Is via the cloud. The stack is the definition of what is cloud is increasing very, very significantly. It has moved well beyond being the infrastructure to driving the application and the data layers. And some of the perennial problems which have been there in the IT stack, again related to data as an example, data has been the most critical thing, but also the most difficult aspect to manage. Cloud, to my mind, is the right way of driving your stack transformation and what is the foundation for the modern IT stack.
So, Jagdish, I hope you got a comprehensive response. Moving back to the questions, Nitin, just to make sure that we go through all of them. This was my favorite question, which when I started put down the question that while winning in the digital age, of course, is more applicable to companies, or it seems to be more applicable. I'm sure there are lessons for individuals. What can each one of us do to ensure that we win in the digital age? We as individuals or professionals, that we win in the digital age. What should we do?
Look, Anshuman, I think the what it means for individuals is even more profound. It has got huge implications. And even if you look at the frame of how I've looked at digital, I have these 7 building blocks. Now, the first couple of them are more enterprise focused, but the sixth and seventh are completely about the individual. Because I absolutely see that that's the real opportunity to my mind. Yeah, driving digital at an enterprise level, especially for existing enterprises, we know the failure rate, 70-80%. Yeah, so it's a difficult problem. I think for the individual, it's a huge opportunity. Now, let me talk about both young professionals and more experienced professionals. Yeah. For young professionals, I think the way to think about digital is that it's the age of abundance, is the age of opportunity. Yeah, that with digital, entry barriers have come down. Entry barriers have come down, and it's so much easier to get started. Also, the advantages of scale, which large enterprises have had, and therefore very high, entry barriers. Those advantages of scale are less so. Yeah. So all this means that it's a great opportunity to be an entrepreneur. And I think the great in what is happening in the digital age, and it's also happening in India, is the unleashing of that entrepreneurial energy and thousands and hundreds of thousands of new enterprises coming up. Yeah. So for young professionals, that would be there are many things I can talk about, but that's the main thing I would say, that, hey, go out, be an entrepreneur. And being an entrepreneur, of course, a big part of it is about being a startup, but it's not just about doing a startup. Yeah. Being an entrepreneur is a mindset. It's a mindset of creating something. Yeah. The world, either you have creators or you have takers. Yeah. And you create so much more value for the world and for yourself if you're a creator. And here is an opportunity to be a creator, but to create something, you have to take risks. And you have to learn. It's also a skill. How do you take risks? Yeah. So that will be my main message for our young colleagues to be an entrepreneur. I think for people with gray hair like two of us, or at least less hair, you still have beautiful thick hair. The main thing will be the need for constant learning, to unlearn and learn. Yeah. See, this age is very different. We started the conversation with this thing about new rules. The world
Correct.
is very different. Enterprises need new rules, but as individuals, as leaders, we also need to need new rules. Yeah. And that's where it is. We need to unlearn. It's like this thing, no, that the pot, if something has to go in, the pot has to be empty, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. So, and that's the most important thing, that how do you unlearn to learn? Yeah. And this, so this whole thing about unlearning and then deliberate learning. How do you learn, not just in a general way, but if there's something you want to learn, how do you really go after that in a very specific way? Yeah. And on top of that, the big challenge is that with our own supposed success, there is this arrogance that comes, that hubris that comes, that I know it, I'm King Kong, I'm world champion. And when that happens, you stop listening. You stop listening, and when you stop listening, you stop learning. So I think for more those of us with gray hair or little hair, that's the most important thing. That how do you go beyond hubris, and how do you put yourself in that situation of continuous learning?
Yeah, and totally, I can totally relate to it. I see it every day. That what some of the success, or actually all of the success that we've had as professionals, or even failures, are with stuff that was relevant 10 years ago. Uh, we sometimes don't even know what is relevant today, what is happening today. And that is the challenge, that do we know? Thankfully, because of the experience and maybe the ability to conceptualize, see the landscape, and learn quickly, once we know, we can figure it out. But that knowing part, taking that first step, is, like you said, is the most important thing. Just going back to some questions from the audience, and I'll pick one more from Anand. Several years in Infosys, Anand is a veteran in the field, but his question, I'll quickly summarize. India leads the digitization paradigm through outsourcing. From your perspective, how do these companies need to transform to once again lead the digital transformation to reduce the 70-80% failure rate that you spoke about? So I think the core question is around the 70-80% failure rate that you spoke about. That, of course, is not the way we will succeed as a generation. So that rate has to come down. What could we do?
I think if I understood Anand's question right, I think Anand is also talking about perhaps the ID services, the whole services industry in India, which is, of course, India is still very much the global leader in outsourcing, offshoring. But what do they need to do to lead in this space of digital transformation? Anand, that's a great question, because it's a great challenge for the Indian industry. Yeah, it's a great challenge, because if you look at, and I'm sure you know this well, that if you look at the growth rate of the IT industry, for so many years, it grew in like this 25% plus range, and then it kind of started, falling, and it came down to 7-8%. Thanks to COVID, it's now back to 10% and up. Yeah, but when I took on Incedo 4 years back, the most interesting phenomena that I saw, I looked at the overall macro picture, was what I call the closing of the jaws. Yeah, that historically the growth rate between the Indian IT industry and the global IT industry was like this. India was growing like this. Most of them were declining. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I saw that over the last 5-10 years, the trend has reversed. India is still growing, but not growing at that rate. The global industries, they've started to pick up the game. And I think a very, very big driver is exactly what you're talking about, is digital transformation. Now, what is fundamentally happening in digital, Anand, from a business perspective, that the role of technology has changed so dramatically from being a support function and then to enabler to being very, very inextricably linked to business. And the boundaries between business and technology are completely blurred, and therefore there is still a lot to be done about global delivery, and I talked about it, but it needs a different mindset. It needs different skills. Yeah. So the Indian industry has been very, very good at industrializing the processes and then delivering them very efficiently. There has been efficiency bias. Yeah. What we have perhaps not done very, very well is build very deep problem solving skills. Is and problem solving not just in a technical way, but in a more iterative, interactive way. The way I learned problem solving in McKinsey, in a consulting firm. Yeah, I see no reason that the same level of problem solving skills, which I learned in McKinsey, is not what the IT industry also needs. It's a very big shift because it's a very, very different mindset. It is, you have to move from that almost the service factory mindset, which India has pioneered and done extremely well. You have to move from the service factory to a lot more of mentoring, role modeling, things like that. Problem solving you don't teach fully in a classroom. You teach it through demonstration. Yeah. So that's one big part of it. But just being able to understand the business way more deeply, then I think what the firms have done so far, I think is another aspect of it. Again, a great question, Anand, but again, this is probably a topic for a fuller conversation.
Sure. Thanks, Nitin. Just scanning the questions, and I think ex- extremely important. Quite a few questions, but some are on the theme around your book, Nitin. So my advice to everybody asking those questions is to buy the book. It is available in India now, so in an Indian print, so should be quite easy. Uh, I'll get to some questions, but maybe since the book has come up, maybe one question, Nitin, is that while we will recommend that people do read your book, but what is the book that you are reading, and what is the one book that you has inspired you, other than this one?
Yeah, see, I'm always reading multiple books at the same time. So, next to my bedside, table, I have five or six books. What I read is almost completely equally distributed between this intersection of business and technology, which is, of course, a big area of passion for me. And the second area is, and you may find it surprising, is spirituality. So, that's something, that I'm extremely passionate about, and also Indian traditions and Indian knowledge and wisdom, and that's something, which is a lifelong learning, mission for me. So, two books that have really inspired me, and which I always, even in my desk here, I have multiple copies of them because I always keep 10 copies of them and I keep on gifting them. There are two books. So one is the Bhagavad Gita, which to me is not a religious book, and it's an incredible book of life and of understanding self. So, as for any human being and any leader, the key thing is about understanding of self, understanding, and I just find it to be an incredible book. I've read it maybe 14, 15 times, but I'm still, every time, I think it's a great learning. And the second book that I would recommend strongly is The Goal. It's a book by Ellie Goldratt. It's one of my favorite books, and I first read it when I was in engineering college in IIT. Then I read it again when I started my career at Madura Courts a long time back, and I went to the shop floor as a management trainee. I did it again as a MBA student at IIM Lucknow, many times at McKinsey. So again, it's a fantastic book which gets to this thing about problem solving, and the heart of solving problem is identifying problems. What is the right problem to solve, and that any situation is a system, and any system will have a bottleneck, and it talks about that in a very, very, very interesting way. It's written as a story. So these are two of my favorite books. People who have worked with me know that these are two books I always talk about and I always keep on. I'm always very, very happy to give them to people. So.
No, and absolutely diverse and fantastic, selection. And I'm often reminded one of the, and I ask this question to quite a few of my guests. And uh, before this one, the most interesting one, and it will, the most interesting is now changing to your book. But the other one was Alice in Wonderland. That is absolutely an amazing way to look at management through something that is often seen as a children's book. So this question always brings great joy to me because it brings a window into your mind and how you operate. So quite a few questions coming in, Nitin, but I'm very mindful of I had to release you at a certain time. So I will call a wrap around this question. There are quite a few questions. So Uday Sangani, who's been a partner at KPMG and other leading firms, Uttam on Quality 4, and several other questions. But guys, since most of these questions are on LinkedIn, what I will do is that I will try and Nitin, when he finds some time, he will also check some of your questions and post a response. But thank you very much for your questions, and this is pretty much a wrap. So Nitin, thank you very much. On behalf of Manage Better, I always close every show apart from thanking the guest with an announcement of the next one. So the next one is another interesting one. It is with it's on 17th of July, 11 a.m. India time, but with the ex vice chairperson of Tata Group, R. Gopalakrishnan, and his co-author as well on and a topic which you actually touched, Nitin, today, or which was on entrepreneurship and the explosion of entrepreneurs in India. But all these entrepreneurs and would-be or wannabe entrepreneurs need the advice that only the grown-ups have, right? So his topic is more around advice for startups from grown-ups. So it's an interesting one. I look forward to that. But I can't close the show without thanking you enough. So once again, on behalf of the whole audience and myself, thank you, Nitin. And we will be in touch, and maybe for another more detailed show on your book at some point. So thank you, and to my audience, till the next show, manage better.
Thanks all. Bye for now.